Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. It's me, Tiffany, and I just wanted to do something a little different compared to what I normally do. And I wanted to focus in on about 4 books from a certain decade, and the decade I picked was from 1900 through 1909. And I have read books in this decade before, but I wanted the books I talk about in this video to be fresh in my brain, so I don't read typically like a theme back to back, so I wanted it to be somewhere between a month and 6 weeks of like recent reads. Fortunately, I met this goal and I read them in about 3.5 weeks. Great for me, makes it easier. And this is just so I can I guess think more critically or talk about them easier than trying to think of the books I may have read for class in the past or what have you. And I'm not going to sit there and compare the themes and go into super details of that because only one of the 4 books that I read were even American literature books, and that was a memoir. So it's written even a little differently than it would be a fiction book, which the other 3 were. So for that reason, I'm just going to tell you my own personal enjoyment. This is not going to be like a super deep analysis. It's just sometimes you just want to do something different, and books are a way to go back in time. Story of My Life by Helen Keller. This is the only American book that I read. Actually, this is the only book that I read that was originally written in English at all. And this is a memoir, and most of you've probably heard about her that are American or at least Southern, because she's from Alabama and, she's a big deal. Because she was blind and deaf, and she was an activist, and she helped basically get the schooling started that would be needed to help other blind and deaf children. And this book might be different than what you expect. It does talk about her life, but it talks more about how she became educated in her relationship with Miss Sullivan, instead of really answering when I started reading this, I thought it would tell me more about what it's like to be blind and deaf, which it slightly touches on, but it's more about her education and how much Miss Sullivan helped her. She was there the entire time, even through college. And Helen Keller was definitely educated. She met Mark Twain. She learned multiple languages, and she accomplished a lot in her lifetime. And she didn't let herself get held back, and that's an amazing thing. But if you're looking for maybe a deeper insight into what it would have been like having, or just not being able to hear or see, it will mostly just tell you on the educational front and how she overcame that and how much she progressed through that, which is nothing wrong. It's just I thought it was going to be a little different, and it was an enjoyable read, though. It's definitely inspiring. This edition has letters and stuff that she has written, and it has supplement guides, but I'm not including that as what I'll talk about. But if you're interested in that, this edition is a good one to go with. The second book I read was called Kwaidan, Stories and Studies of Strange Things by Lafcadio Hearn. I hope I pronounced all that right. And this was a series of short story collections. It was about Japanese stories, but it was written by a Greek man who eventually moved to Japan, and he did live in Japan, so he learned these stories being there. He studied them a lot, but he was Greek. And some of these stories are very interesting. They're all strange, but without spoiling anything, there is this particular story, if you've read it, about a swan that just made me put the book down and go, what did I just read? And I'm not saying that as a negative thing. These things were actually really interesting, and I enjoyed them. I wanted something different, and this gave me that. It wasn't scary, but it was definitely strange. And it even opens up in the book that they're divided by different insects, and it was talking about some of them, especially the ones with butterflies in them, may have Chinese origins instead of Japanese origins. And Yeah, I definitely recommend this. None of the stories are long, so if you just wanted to read like one a day and get like that little splice of something interesting, this could be a way to go. So the third book I read was The Scarlet Pimpernel. This was definitely an interesting read. The Scarlet Pimpernel is a dude who goes undercover and saves a bunch of rich French people during the time of the French Revolution. And he's undercover. I've seen some historical sites say this is kind of where the hidden identity came from, and I've seen some that given it to a couple other books, but it's all around the same time. So if it's not this, it's around that time, and it's one of the more prominent ones. And it was definitely an interesting read. Like, I couldn't read too much of it at one time because it's just not really my thing, but it was not a bad book. The characters were really fleshed out. They were very believable. You actually got interested in the little bit of drama that was everywhere. This is kind of a chick lit, like, stereotypically, but that's not a bad thing. There is a part that really annoyed me, and with older classics, sometimes just because of culture back then, there are some problematic things. There was a Jewish character that kept popping up, and they always called him the Jew instead of by name, and that just kind of annoyed me, like, a lot. And there was little bitty other stuff that I was just kind of like, ugh, but then I had to think to myself of, this was written in, like, 1905, so you had to keep that in mind if you do read this and that annoys you as well. This is a long series. I'm not going to continue it, but I did enjoy this, and apparently there's a couple of movies, so I might check that out. Okay, so the last book I technically DNF'd. I Am a Cat. This is the first one. Apparently there's 3, and they're all about 200 pages. Like, this one is like exactly 206 pages. This is a Japanese classic. And I love the idea of this book. I made it about halfway through, but it wasn't for me. It's definitely interesting. You're in the mind of a cat while the cat goes on throughout its day, and a lot of stuff made me think of like cat memes and like cat TikToks of just how they think about humans and think about other things. And I enjoyed those memes and all that stuff so much. And I don't think the writing was bad, but I just didn't care enough or wanted to go through 200 pages of it. And after like 3 or 4 pages, I was just like, okay, cool. Can I do something else now? And so I just DNF'd it. But it is interesting, and it is like simple to read. So if you wanted to dive into a Japanese classic, this may be a good spot for you. But normally I don't care for the point of view of animals anyways. Like, I've read Animal Farm, and I did finish and did like it, but it felt different than like other books where you're like in the point of view of animals, and maybe that's just not for me. I don't think it is. The few times I've tried it, I haven't liked any of them, so maybe this was just a bad pick for me personally, but I don't think this is a bad book. I didn't finish it, so I can't give you a super detailed feelings on it, even though I'm trying to keep all of these vague. But if you want something and you like cat memes and cat jokes and stuff, this may be for you. It just wasn't for me, even though I love cats and cat memes. But there are 3 of them, and most of the time they are sold together. My library had like a big edition of that and them separate. I just wanted to start the first one just because I didn't know. Okay, guys, that is it. I just basically wanted to time travel through books, so I did with 4 books. And if there's any books in this decade that you enjoyed, please let me know in the comment section below. Or if you've read any of these and you've either loved or hate them or somewhere in between, please let me know that too. And I'll see you next time.